Yes, are we missing? No problem. No. Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the 34th and final meeting in 2012 of the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee. Welcome to the Minister, who will introduce in a second. And I just remind everyone, please, to turn off all mobile phones and other electrical devices. Now, first item on the agenda, I'd like to welcome a new member of the committee, Margaret McDougall. Margaret, invite you to declare any relevant interests.
No, I don't have any interest that I think would be contradictory to this committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 2 on the agenda. Are the committee happy to take item 5 in private consideration of the evidence we've heard today?
I agree.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, item 3, continuation of the work we're doing looking at the skills agenda. I'm very pleased to welcome this morning Angela Constance, Minister for Youth Employment, who's joined by Hugh McAloon, Head of Youth Employability and Skills at the Scottish Government. Before we get into questions, Minister, would you like to say something by way of introduction?
Yes, just very briefly, Convener, and good morning and thank you to you all. I am, of course, very grateful to committee for the invitation to be here this morning to discuss the very important issue of skills. Committee will understand that my portfolio has a very sharp focus on young people and youth employment. But I also have responsibility for skills policy and a number of issues that impact on all age employment. For example, I lead the work on behalf of the government with respect to women's employment issues. So, as colleagues will be aware, the Scottish Government published its skills strategy at the end of 2010. I believe that good progress has been made in taking forward a number of actions that were identified at the time, but importantly also in setting out a more ambitious agenda for skills. And at the heart of our skills strategy is the need to empower individuals, but also to support employers. And this twin aspiration is the focus of the skills agenda and, of course, some of our wider educational reform. The focus for me is on improving the employment prospects of learners and to ensure that we get a better matching of the needs of individual learners and the needs of employers, both now and in the future. I believe one of our successes is the level of provision, the level of skills provision that we have secured. I think that gives us a very strong platform for continuous improvement. We have a commitment in each year of this Parliament to deliver 46,500 training places. Within that, there's a year-on-year commitment to deliver 25,000 modern apprenticeships. So this stable commitment gives us a sound platform and I think can move us away from a debate about the volume and quantity of training, because there's a clear commitment about that, and take the debate into the areas of how we improve outcomes for learners, employers and, of course, our economy. Now, Convener, I know that young people are a priority for us all. Youth unemployment is currently remains too high, despite the welcome step in the direction with the labour market stats last week. But I would also contend that youth unemployment was too high even in times of economic growth. If you look at the pre-recession rates of youth unemployment at about 12–14%, I would argue that that was too high. And that, to me, emphasises the importance of the right skills strategy and how you need the right skills strategy both in times of economic difficulties but also in times of economic growth, because when it comes to skills you can never afford to take your eye off the ball. Of course, since the skills strategy was published, we have introduced opportunities for all and a range of other measures designed to tackle youth employment. And just finally, Convener, I've always said that after young people themselves, employers are our top priority. And I've spent much of my last year in post learning from employers, engaging with employers, but I suppose also challenging employers as well as have them challenge me. Because I'm clear that a skills system that doesn't work for employers actually doesn't work for anybody in terms of individuals seeking work or indeed meeting the needs of our economy. We still have significant progress to make. I believe we've made important steps forward in improving the skills system in Scotland, and we've got a good solid foundation to make for further improvements, and I'm very much looking forward to committee's contribution to that debate and how we take things forward.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that introduction. There's a number of areas that have come up in the evidence we've heard so far that I think members will want to cover. I think there's the issue about meeting skills gaps and how the skills agenda interfaces with the employer's needs, issues around the interface with the education system, specifically I think renewables, which is something members are very interested in following a recent report, looking at gender issues, looking at some of the difficulties SMEs face in accessing training, and finally looking at the development of the skills strategy. So I think we'll want to cover some of these areas when it comes to the questioning. I would make my usual exhortation to members to be succinct and to the point in their lines of questioning. It's only fair to tell you, Minister, that the members of this committee have just been through a rigorous programme of training in asking effective questions, and you are our first guinea pig in front of the committee to see what impact that will have on witnesses. So I'm sure members will look forward to working out everything they've learned in their training with you. And obviously, I would, Minister, if you can be succinct and to your point in the answers, that would be very helpful. Very helpful too. Thank you. Maybe I could just start off by raising an issue that came up in evidence, which is this question of skills gaps, because you know we do have this mismatch in the economy whereby, as you rightly point out, there are a large number of people, particularly young people, who are unemployed. We do have a broad range of skills and training programmes available, and yet what's come to the committee in evidence regularly from employers is they still have difficulty filling vacancies because they can't get people with the right skills coming forward. So, first of all, I mean, do you accept that there is still more to be done in terms of addressing that mismatch? And if so, can you tell us what is being done at present to try and address that issue?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. There's more to be done in terms of addressing the issue of skills gaps and skills shortages. I think it is important to remember the context in terms of the percentage of establishments who have a hard to fill vacancy. That's only at 4%. In terms of the percentage of establishments who have a skills shortage vacancy, that's about 3%. But nonetheless, I think we have to be careful when we're talking about skills gap and skills shortages, because I don't think it's a global issue. I think it's quite specific to specific industries and specific sectors. In broad terms, I think, I suppose when people talk about skills gap and skills shortages, we do have to see it as an opportunity, because when employers are talking to me about these issues, I'm saying, well, what are you doing to recruit more young people, and what are you doing to recruit more women? So there are opportunities and a way forward in discussions about skills gaps and skills shortages, about how we can work with employers to better utilise the talents of all the population, whether that's women or young people. I think in terms of having a very specific response to specific industries, I'm aware that committee will have heard about the skills investment plans. There's a well-established skills investment plan in industry, food and drink, and this is about us ensuring that the skills system actually responds not just to the overall needs of the economy, but to the specific needs of specific industries. So, but yes, there's more to do. I'll just ask Hugh if there was anything he would like to pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are different aspects to responding to skills needs of employers. So, if an employer is looking to take on new people, people new to the labour market, then clearly what we do in the pre-employment parts of the system are important. So whether that's colleges or other training programmes that are offering people training before they move into work, then we have to make sure that that's as aligned as possible to the needs of employers, and there are moves all across that system to do that. Offering employers opportunities to train up their own staff, the Modern Apprenticeship Programme is a good example of that. I think if employers are looking for people with a bit more experience and there are significant barriers to them doing the training, and we focus largely on smaller employers, then offering flexible provision that lets the employer decide what the focus for them is, and actually, moving on their existing workforce to where they want it to be, or bringing people in from other parts of the economy, are important. So I think the flexible training opportunities that we've put in place, launched about 3 years ago, that has become really quite popular among SMEs, and I think the beauty of that approach is that it's a co-investment model, so it's not, government will come and solve all your problems, put money in, and it's very much tied to what the employer needs. So the employer gets to decide what it is they're going to co-invest in with the government. So rather than us sitting in government offices trying to design programmes that we think will work for employers, it's much more the other way. What is it you need to develop your workforce to fill these sort of skills gaps within your existing workforce? And let's have a partnership approach to that. And that is something that has developed quite well over the last 3 years, I would say.
Okay. Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, Minister. I'm sure you don't resemble anything like a guinea pig, but there you go. The Minister, earlier this week I was at a meeting in Aberdeen with the principals from the universities of Aberdeen, Robert Gordon's, and the principals from Aberdeen College and Banff-and-Buchan, and they've come together and they're working collaboratively together at looking at how they address the skill shortage within the energy sector. Now, what was encouraging is they say they're responding to the sector need, which is obviously a completely different way of producing maybe courses, etc., than they've done in the past. Do you welcome the initiative that's been taking place in Aberdeen? And I know that your colleague Fergus Ewan's been doing a lot of work in that area. But it's not just addressing the people for the offshore market, it's addressing the whole energy sector and everything that goes with it, from project management to office assistants to chefs, to some of the labouring skills, and to even the sort of geophysicists and all those opportunities that goes with the skill sector. And furthermore, rather than being based just in the North East, do you see that rolling out for the rest of Scotland and for the other universities and colleges, and indeed employers, to take the initiative from, I think, which is an exemplar that's happening in Aberdeen?
Yes, Mr Robertson. I mean, I think there's a great example of collaboration in the North East that understandably is very focused on the energy sector and oil and gas in particular. And I think one of the things that we have to do better is to be articulating to young people the length and breadth of Scotland, the range of opportunities in oil and gas and in energy. And obviously there's a particular locus for oil and gas in the North East. But then if you look at the need for engineers, there's quite a strong engineering base in Renfrewshire. Oil and gas is an industry, with 30 to 50 years left of untapped potential. So it's a huge asset to us, and we need to make more of selling careers in oil and gas, but energy as a whole to young people. It is a good career to pursue. There's a huge range of careers. Somebody was telling me that in terms of the offshore work, that's just about 10%, but the majority of work is actually onshore. And I think as we move forward with college reform, I think we will see more collaboration at that local level. I know of good example. I mean, the West Lothian economy is very different to the North East economy, but in terms of collaboration there in and around sectors that are important to the West Lothian economy, that would be a bit around retail and personal and social care provision. So we do need to have a more acute alignment between the local economic needs and our educational provision that's available locally, without forgetting that there are opportunities for energy and oil and gas across the country. And the Energy Skills Academy, which we're currently working through the detail of, will be a good way of enhancing what's already delivered in the North East, particularly with our eye on employers, having that one-stop shop for employers and supply chains, about things like, a database on energy training opportunities. It'll have a locus in the North East in oil and gas, but will also, take cognizance of the nationwide opportunities in energy.
What more will you be able to do from a government perspective with yourself and colleagues to ensure that the STEM subjects are probably taken up more by young girls, and the opportunities to get more women into all sectors within energy and obviously outside the energy field as well? Because the market seems to be very male dominated, and obviously, it's probably from the education side, maybe using curriculum for excellence and working through, but more needs to be done. And what do you see as your role in trying to address that particular problem?
I would see my role as one of trying to support systemic change. And Mr. Robertson's absolutely right. We do need more girls, choosing to study STEM-related subjects and to pursue STEM-related careers. That's not just true for science and technology. There are also issues with ICT, which is struggling to attract young people and young women. Members may be aware that we held the first ever Women's Employment Summit. Now, that covered a vast array of issues in and around women's employment. But one of those issues and one of the streams of work flowing from that is in and around occupational segregation. Now, there's no silver bullet to tackling occupational segregation. It has to be systemic. It has to start in schools early. It's one of the reasons that we announced CareerWise, a programme to get good role models into schools early, before girls make choices about subject choices. I also think there's a role for career guidance and advice in terms of this. So there's a lot more we can do in terms of getting women, more women into STEM-related subjects, because there are good careers here that in the long term will help us tackle issues such as equal pay. I don't know, Hugh, is there anything you would like to add?
Not particularly. I was just thinking a little bit as well around about the importance of older women, maybe people, women returners to the labour market, and the sort of support we can provide them. And again, looking at where we're heading with our pre-employment training, if someone comes along is looking for some support through the programmes we provide, if they are more aligned to where the opportunities exist, then that I think is something that can maybe make a bit of a difference around the sort of choices people are making when they're coming back into the labour market. And then I think finally there's something about something the Minister referred to earlier, a bit of a challenge out to employers to think about wider in terms of the sort of the range of talent that they've got available to them, and thinking beyond the sort of workforce they have at the moment. So there's a bit of a cultural thing at the schools end, there's a bit of a cultural thing at the employer's end, but actually the steps we're trying to take around careers advice, pre-employment training, and aligning that to the needs of employers, making people more attractive to employers, is designed to help deal with some of those cultural issues.
Chick Bruni.
Thank you. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, Mr. McEwen. If I may, I'd like to start perhaps with a curveball. And if you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. But I would ask this question as a European reporter on the committee. What do you know about the European skills panorama?
Well, Mr. Brodie has just flung the curved ball to the guinea pig. Can I urge Mr. Brodie to be a bit more specific?
Right, that was an unfair question, I know. But today, the European Commission is launching a programme to tackle skills mismatches across Europe. We had the experience 2 weeks ago at the Meeting Commission of hearing programmes, financial programmes for small businesses, of which we knew nothing, because the member state that should have been passing on that information, I suspect, didn't do that. And I suspect the same thing is going to happen here, because any input that we might have to this has to go through the member state. We're not yet such a member state. So we can pass on the details later, but it is important in terms of, if I may focus on engineering particularly, that while we want to train people indigenously, that if there are opportunities abroad or people coming into Scotland, we have to look at the international aspects of developing the labour market with a long-term benefit that will accrue from that. Let me go back more specifically, if I may, then to, and again, I largely focus on the point that Dennis Robertson made in terms of oil and gas. Last week, and I wasn't here because of illness, it appears that Mr. Alexander of the SCDI highlighted an issue that there's a chicken and egg challenge with regard to developing skills first or waiting for the jobs. Do you not think we should be investing in the skills in line with our economic strategy and not waiting for the jobs to turn up, particularly when we need or will need 60,000 additional jobs in the renewables and oil and gas industry?
In terms of the two strands to Mr. Brodie's question, committee may be aware that I visited Europe a few weeks ago, met with a range of representatives from a range of countries, and including representatives from the Commission. So I'm aware that the Commission is very focused on issues in and around the mobility of labour. The purpose of my visit to Europe is I have a deep interest in European countries that, despite a global economic recession, have youth unemployment levels of less than 10%. And, I believe the reason for that lies in and around their vocational education and training systems. And you can never transport somebody else's system, carte blanche, into your country, but I think there's some significant learning from countries that are weathering the storm in terms of youth employment. I think in terms of, what the skills system has to try and do is prepare people for the jobs that currently exist, but also for the future. And in terms of engineering and energy, the skills investment plans are very much trying to tackle that. Now, with regards to energy, I'm aware that things can change quite quickly in terms of global economic trends. But we do know, oil and gas is going to be with us. We do know that renewables is, certainly an industry of the future. And the skills investment plan for energy is just currently being reviewed and renewed, and there's two things arising from that. More granular labour market information, and what I think the sector itself is recognising as an industry, they need to be better and clearer at articulating, their current and future needs. And, in terms of my meetings with the oil and gas UK or PITO industry leadership groups, there is that acknowledgement that they need to more consistently articulate what it is their needs are. I know Hugh has a deep knowledge in labour market information, some of the technicalities around that, but essentially the skills system is having to meet the needs of today and plan for tomorrow.
But given that we have quite clearly, let's say, 6 major sectors that we're focusing on, and I focus on engineering, and not just in the energy market, but also, for example, in Prestwick, a lot of effort going into aerospace and the need for engineers. I don't understand, again, a comment, and again, I wasn't here, from the Scottish Funding Council that it says it's a challenge to identify how we can best identify and roll out best practice in employer engagement between colleges, a regional college, and SMEs or companies in that area. I mean, what is the challenge in creating a cluster of communication fora to make sure that people know what the college is developing in line, hopefully, with the economic strategy of the country, and getting the companies in these sectors together with colleges? I mean, it's not as if Scotland, covers half the globe. We are not a huge geographical country, and so how do you define that challenge, or do you agree with that challenge?
Well, I mean, I accept that there are advantages in Scotland being a small country. In terms of your earlier point, in terms of the government's economic strategy, if you look at the skills investment plans and the skills action plans, I think there very much is an alignment there with our skills investment in terms of the government's economic strategy. I think in terms of engagement, particularly with smaller businesses, I think as with anything that involves relationships, we always have to work at it. I think from my reading of last week's transcript, I think it is generally accepted that in some ways it's easier to engage with larger companies because you know where they are, and energy is populated with larger companies. So in some regards that engagement should be easier. I suppose there are other sectors. I mean, I'm thinking about food and drink, tourism, that are more heavily populated with small to medium-sized enterprises. I would accept that we need to get better at engaging and listening with employers, but my understanding is that the Scottish Funding Council is organising itself to do that in and around regional outcome agreements. So I wouldn't want to underplay it as an easy task, but neither do I think it's insurmountable. I think we'd all accept that it's harder to engage with smaller companies, because smaller companies, are, they're smaller, they're under the cosh, they're trying to keep their head above water, and, we therefore have to work harder at reaching out to smaller companies. We can't necessarily rely on them coming to us.
One last question. Yeah. Again, a quote from last week that we had the representative Flyby saying there was a big problem with social interaction, particularly amongst the young and the way in which they grow up. She then went on to say the education system is going to have to think about how to build social interaction more formally into the curriculum. I think that's poppycock. Education largely begins in the home, And I just wonder how we're attracting and involving parents in the attractiveness. Again, I refer to engineering, and we've had witnesses here who've complained about engineering not being seen as a sexy career. So what are we doing to involve and embrace parents in encouraging youngsters to go into, for example, the engineering industry?
Absolutely. Can I, in terms of your point about social interaction, I always point to the UK Commission on Employability Skills, who did a massive survey across the UK, and the evidence is that with employers who actually recruit young people, they're actually very satisfied with the work readiness of young people. So that, to me, would suggest that our education system is actually doing something right. Communication skills, which I assume is what was meant by social interaction, are, of course, core skills. They're very important place in the curriculum. And given where young people are currently employed, it tends to be very people-intensive services. Young people are still getting into, retail, hospitality. I suppose I'm thinking about call centres, sales type work. I mean, all of that would suggest to me that, the vast majority of young people have good communication skills. I do, of course, think we should all remember what we ourselves were like when we were 17. I'm quite sure that our own communication skills would be less well developed at the age of 17. But that's not to say that I don't accept that there are issues for some young people, further removed from the labour market, and that they need, more intensive input with the core skills. I think the point about parents is really, really imperative. Parents are key influencers. That's obviously stating the obvious. And parents need to know the range of careers out there. And I'm very keen that vocational education is not seen as something that's just for young people who don't quite get the hires that they need. I'm a big advocate of higher education and degrees, but there is a panoply of options out there for young people, and we shouldn't just be making assumptions about what's best for young people. All young people are different, and we have huge opportunities available to young people in terms of the modern apprenticeship programme being one example. And if there is an area that we do need to get better at, I think it is communicating with parents about those range of career options. We need to develop our relationships and are working with business, particularly small business. But I think there's progress being made there. But I do feel there is better progress to be made in engaging with parents, and that's certainly part of my discussions with Fergus Ewan as the enterprise minister, who's a very keen ear to the needs of business, and my work with Dr. Allen in terms of schools and the curriculum. But we need massive awareness raising of particular careers that are important to the economy.
Just before I bring in Rhoda Grant, I was very interested, Minister, because twice you mentioned vocational education, which I think is absolutely crucial here. I mean, do you think there's a need, as well as developing further in higher education, to develop greater strands of vocational education at school level?
I think the senior phase of the Curriculum for Excellence gives us huge opportunities. We have a platform of reform across our education sector just now. Even in terms of what we're doing in the early years, never lose sight of the importance of the early years and on people's future employability prospects. There's all the work that's going on in the Curriculum for Excellence. We've got post-16 reform, career guidance, and I think where and the government will be saying more about this at the turn of the year, we will be stating how we build and take things forward, on those 4 very important cornerstones of reform. And part of my reason for my trip to Brussels a few weeks ago was to take a far closer look at how vocational education operates in different countries. And as I say, this isn't about, adopting somebody else's system, carte blanche. We've got a great platform in terms of curriculum for excellence, internationally recognised. We want to keep that broad-based education. We don't want to be pigeonholing youngsters too early, but there needs to be better identified routes, clearer pathways. We really do need that alignment between the world of education and the world of work throughout our education system. That isn't just an issue for colleges and universities, that is an issue for schools, for primary schools. It touches on careers guidance. It's about good school employer links. So we've got a great platform to build upon, but there's still a real job of work to be done.
Right, Rhoda Grant.
We heard evidence last week about the whole skills sector being quite cluttered, and that was okay if you were a large company with specialists looking at the sector, but it was really difficult for small businesses to navigate the whole of the skills sector. What are you doing to make that easier to navigate?
I think it's important to acknowledge that we have and will continue to look at simplifying the skills sector. But the reality is it's always going to have a degree of complexity about it. We have local authorities, employability partnerships. We've got the Scottish Government, we've got DWP in the UK Government, and then you've got skills sectors councils and all the rest of it. But what we need to do, particularly for small business, is 2 things. Hide the hard wiring. There are, bits of this, it's about informing people about what they need to know and what they want to know. So we need to hide the hard wiring, and we need to have no wrong door approach for small business. And our skills force, which is the one-stop shop, web-based provision, is a great tool, a great opportunity that brings together local and national information. So if you're a small business in Falkirk, at the touch of a button, you can see what's available to you in terms of national and local offers. As part of that service, there's also a skills alert function, so that Skills Development Scotland can be having better, more accurate, up-to-date, be taking the pulse of business, if you like. So I do think our skills force is very important. It's been developed and we'll continue to refine it to make sure we get it right, but it has been developed in partnership with the stakeholders in industry and Federation of Small Business. But we do have to make it easier for small business in particular to engage with the skills system, and that's about having no wrong door and hiding the hard wiring of the skills system, if you like.
Certainly they were saying that the portal was very difficult if you weren't kind of IT literate and didn't really know what you were looking for. That was quite complex to navigate. Is there, or have you thought of looking at advisors that would actually do some of that work for small businesses, that would kind of break down some of those barriers? You were saying there's no wrong doors, so obviously you're talking about the system will point people in the right direction. But is there a need for someone to advise businesses?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, in terms of Skills Development Scotland, a major shift in their outlook and philosophy over the last probably since about 2010, is that they're not there just to service young people, that, you know, employers are as much their client, for want of a better word, as, you know, learners and you know, users of provision. There is obviously, you know, at a local level, business gateways. You know, my exposure to our skills force is that it's quite an easy tool to use, and I'm, you know, personally a bit limited when it comes to my own ICT skills. But you know, I'm sure there are people out there that do need support. You know, a fundamental for any business surviving today, you know, will be, you know, the use of technology for their functions. And I'm just wondering to you whether, in terms of the Scottish Employability Forum, and what will happen at a local level, whether the support, that one-to-one support, whether it's more appropriate that that's at a local level.
I think the Minister referred to SDS and their advice directly to businesses and Business Gateway, and the importance of that. So there may well be some businesses. I mean, the way I always look at this for a small employer is they do not engage with the skills system very often. They have a training need or a recruitment need. They want to come in. It has to be quite simple for them, and it might be 3 or 4 years before they come back. Not always, but quite often. So for, you know, people who are very immersed in this, you can look at something like our skills force and go, right, that's absolutely everything you need. But if you're not very used to it, then even if you are IT literate, getting your way around that can be a bit of a challenge. SDS will continue to work with partners to make that simpler, and will particularly focus on working with employers who are trying to use the system. But I think as a tool for those advising businesses as well, this can be quite a useful thing. So if you do go to Business Gateway, the advice that you get from any individual person will always be limited to the information they have at their fingertips. Our skills force adds a significant amount of extra information to those advisors. So I think there is something here about, if you just think a web-based service is going to solve all the problems of the world, then I think the point you're making is that would be wrong, and I would agree with that. For people in the system who businesses engage with, to be able to access information through that sort of service and advise clients as they go, employers as they go, is a significant improvement to how things are at the moment, where people do get quite bewildered by the various offers that are available and the terminology and all the things that were discussed at the committee last week. So I think there's that tool is there for people coming straight in as employers, but it's also there for those advising employers.
So who would provide that kind of one-to-one support if you're a small business? As you say, you're only looking for some skills development, say in 4 years or whatever, something has changed, you need to develop one of your members of staff. Who would actually do that hand-holding? Who would advise? Who would tell you where the funding was? Who would tell you where the training was?
A range of agencies that offer that sort of support, and the important thing is that they offer, you know, that they communicate a coherent message about what's available. So you could have SDS Skills Investment Advisors, you could have DWP staff if it's about recruitment, you could have Business Gateway, you could have Scottish Enterprise Account Managers for some cases. The key is that they are actually all communicating the whole offer rather than their bit of the offer, and that's what our skills force tries to bring together across all these organisations, and that's something very much that there is commitment between local authorities, Scottish Government and UK Government to try and make this coherent offer as clear as possible to anybody who's advising to a small business.
So then when small businesses are saying this is difficult to navigate, you're saying they could pitch up at any one of those doors and get the advice they need, then I'm not quite sure why they're finding it so difficult.
I suppose, I mean, I'm quite this was launched a few months ago, and I suppose would be quite surprised if there was a kind of wealth of small businesses saying that they're finding our skills force difficult. I think the most immediate challenge we have is to get that message out there that our skills force exists, and where people can actually go to for advice. And, you know, that can be, you know, Skills Development Scotland, the local business gateway, or in some cases Scottish Enterprise. But I mean, I accept, you know, the point about, you know, coherence of message.
Mike McKenzie?
Thank you, Convener. Do you feel that there's any problem in terms of a disconnect between the aspirations, the career aspirations that youngsters acquire growing up or going through the education system, and the reality, their perceptions of the job market and career opportunities that may be available to them, and the actuality of career opportunities that are available? And if you feel that, is there something more that we can do to help prevent that, to get better engagement?
I think that's quite... I've been trying very hard, Convener, to be succinct, but Mr Mackenzie's touched on a real bit of a hornet's nest, you know, quite a broad area. I think it's imperative that in terms of what's taught and available within classrooms, whether it's from teaching staff or careers guidance staff, that, you know, while at the end of the day we can't corral young people into choosing particular careers, but we really do need to be inspiring young people into the great career opportunities that exist in some of our growth areas, in terms of, you know, whether it's food and drink, you know, whether it's energy, engineering. I mean, what a great career if you're looking for, you know, there's not many certainties in this world, but, you know, if you were seeking work, I mean, you know, engineers are so sought after. You know, I think the average age of an engineer is 50 plus. You know, there are huge opportunities out there. So we need to be inspiring and enthusing young people about the realities, about where the jobs exist now and where they are in the future. We are, of course, you know, dealing with, you know, perceptions that sometimes exist within our popular culture, within, you know, family, within schools. So we need to be getting, you know, good penetration of information throughout our education system about the opportunities that actually exist. I think My World of Work, in terms of a web-based facility, is a great opportunity that we should be promoting, not just amongst young people, but with parents. You know, I think the notion of career management skills being taught in the classroom, because I think for a 15-year-old today, by the time they're 40, they may well have been in 10 different job roles. I've had a few career changes myself, you know, so, you know, we need to be getting young folk to a position of resilience. They're going to have to live and work in a world that's ever-changing. And there will need to be that flexibility and adaptability. So yeah, I mean, there is much more we can do. Again, you know, we've got that platform of reform in terms of career guidance, but we do, it all hinges on the connectivity between education and the world of work. And there are many, you know, education's about, you know, creating a civilised and learned country, but at its very core, you know, education's about preparing folk for work, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yeah, apologies for opening the hornet's nest. I think you've given me a pretty comprehensive answer, so thank you very much.
David Torrance.
Good morning. We've talked about skill shortages and focused on the renewable and oil and gas sector, but I would like to turn to manufacturing based industries, where there's a huge shortage of engineers just now. What incentives is there to take on young apprentices who are going to take 3 or 4 years to train to be an engineer, and probably will be lost to the oil and gas sector or renewables by these companies, and where there's already made supply already in the European market, where it's easy for these companies to go to and bring them in?
I mean, I think that's true. You know, we have a global economy, and you know, there's a competitiveness to that. But you know, the mobility of well-trained Scots engineers to work across the world shouldn't be something that we should shy away from. Yes, it takes longer to train an engineer in terms of, you know, a level 3 engineering framework. It is 3 or 4 years, but I think there needs to be more collaboration within industry, and I know you can't necessarily compare the textiles industry with the oil and gas industry, but one of the things that textiles has managed to do quite successfully is to stop cutting each other's throat in terms of poaching staff, and have actually begun to work collaboratively in the training of young people into an industry. So sometimes, you know, and I do genuinely think there's that desire within energy and oil and gas in particular, that, you know, they need to coalesce around industry's need, and, you know, kind of plan ahead in terms of developing, you know, their workforce, and, you know, not always, you know, trying to move away from this, you know, quite competitive environment. I mean, I know, you know, it's a very high-paid salaries in oil and gas, and, you know, that's used as a tool to you know, retain staff or attract staff. But I do think there needs to be a more industry collaboration, and just thinking a wee bit more about the longer term, because, you know, skill shortages aren't in anybody's interest. They're not in the interest of the economy, and they're not in the interest of industry or indeed those individual companies. So it's moving towards a longer term approach. And I think that there is that desire and will in terms of, you know, oil and gas to start just planning a bit better and not always trying to live for the moment.
Alison Jones.
I recently met with a young man who was deaf, and he was trying to access funding because he was keen to pursue a career as a personal trainer. And I think, you know, he'd bring a great deal to that. He had skills in, you know, in terms of sign language and so on that I think would be incredibly helpful. But he was finding it very challenging to get hold of the funding. I think his first attempt had been unsuccessful to get him onto the course that he wanted to do. And I did feel he was quite well supported with a couple of, you know, vocal advocates. And I just wondered what extra support, what support is in place for those with additional needs who may need a bit more help, you know, in terms of form filling or just engaging with the process of accessing a course.
Yeah, I mean, there is significant amounts of money allocated within further education and higher education for those additional costs to help. You know, there's additional costs that are associated with young people with an additional support need that needs to be addressed for them to pursue or participate in the learning. It's difficult for me to talk about very specific cases. I'm always happy to receive information about individual cases. This probably gets me in trouble with officials, but I do like to know about individual cases because it's an understanding, you know, the individual cases and how the system can be challenged or made to work better that I think's appropriate. But in terms of, you know, support for young people with additional support or learning needs, you know, I suppose it would depend where they've come from in terms of school, Skills Development Scotland, you know, are of course a good point of contact, and also, you know, within colleges and universities. But I am always aware that it's difficult because of the range of additional support needs. You know, that it's difficult to have a carte blanche solution. But you know, there are always issues that we need to address, and that support should be there systematically. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Hugh?
Not particularly. I think that there are some issues which the Minister's been exploring around access to the MA programme for young people in particular with disabilities. I think there are real challenges in there, but I think there is scope for us to be doing more on that, and that's certainly looking like a focus over the next year or so.
Yeah, I certainly had a very informative meeting with the employment services about how we increase the participation of young people with disabilities in, for example, the Modern Apprenticeship Programme. The same issues are there for young people from a black and minority ethnic community, and a lot of it is about perception as opposed to the actual disability being the barrier.
This is, you know, again a question about young people who need extra support. And your colleague, the Minister for Children and Young People, met with a group from Stepping Stones in North Edinburgh who were in Parliament earlier this week. It was part of a Save the Children event. And, you know, we had a committee room full of young single mums who were actually desperate to get into skills training, but they have the issue of simply couldn't access affordable childcare. And they pointed to North Edinburgh Childcare, who have places. I think the average fee in Edinburgh for childcare is apparently £38 a day, where North Edinburgh Childcare have £16 a day, which, you know, to them is something that they could consider. And, you know, I know it's not entirely within your remit, but I just wondered what collaboration you had with the Minister for Children and Young People, just making it possible for those in that position to actually access the training through the provision, a greater provision of affordable childcare.
Yeah. I suppose there's 2 points there. I'm familiar with the work of the North Edinburgh Childcare Centre. I've actually visited it not once but twice, and they do, you know, something that's quite unique, as well as providing affordable childcare. They're actually a training provider. You know, they're skilling up women and training women for work. And that tends to be in and around careers and childcare. So, you know, they're a well-established service, both for women getting into work and in terms of childcare. Childcare issue is massive. It was a prominent focus in the Women's Employment Summit, and in terms of getting women into particular careers, in terms of women returners, in terms of young women that are maybe a wee bit further away from the labour market, you know, access to affordable, flexible childcare is imperative. So obviously I work closely with Ms Campbell in terms of, you know, I mean, there's going to be the change in legislation in terms of increasing the number of hours that are available to people as a statutory right in terms of 3- and 4-year-olds. And the important part of that is the flexibility. Because obviously as a working mother myself, I'm aware of I suppose some of the constraints around provision that's school-based. It's quite rigid, and you know, many women will go on to work. You know, it wouldn't necessarily be, you know, hours that, you know, in terms of nursery provision, 9 to 11, you know, Monday to Thursday. You know, there's not many people who have hours, you know, that coalesce around that. So the childcare aspect is absolutely crucial, and there's work, you know, being pursued with Aileen Campbell about that. But there is a broader issue about the integration of benefits and our tax system. And you know, I've always, and I'm not seeking to be political, but I think you're not ever really going to address the affordability issue without control over tax and welfare benefits.
We have a couple of members who want to come in with follow-ups. Chick Brodie and then Dennis Robertson.
Yes, thank you. Just on the point about helping young people, I wonder, Minister, the biggest problem, so in my opinion, that faces our economy is the lack of start-up businesses. And I just wonder how much engagement there is in terms of supporting young people who wish to start up their own business or indeed create a social enterprise. Given the opportunities coming down the pike in terms of public procurement and community empowerment, what engagement is there with, probably with the Minister for Enterprise, in terms of encouraging young people to start up their own businesses?
I'm probably aware of the work that John Swinney and Fergus Yoon do through financial support to the Prince's Trust in terms of start-up grants. In terms of, from my perspective, entrepreneurship and starting up your own business is a feasible route out of unemployment, and that in the panoply of services and opportunities that we're trying to offer young people, we do have to bear that in mind. We're meant to be a nation of inventors and entrepreneurs, and we shouldn't forget that, and not for it to be dismissed as an opportunity for young people. I've certainly met some fantastic young business people from a wide variety of backgrounds. So, the Prince's Trust does a lot of good work in terms of grants, but there's also other quite innovative funding models in terms of crowdfunding. I had a really interesting meeting with a lady called Michelle Roger.
Are we really getting really down in amongst the young people? I mean, I know some people are aware of it and we communicate through various mechanisms, but I don't believe that we are really getting into the kernel, the heart of youth unemployment, particularly in more deprived areas, where there might be, as Sir Tom Hunter said, somebody sitting in a garage somewhere that could be developing the next phase of Google. I just, I get a feeling that, yes, we are doing all these good things, but are we really reaching out to the mass of young people who, lots of them have got no fear, they're prepared to take risks, and I just wonder if we're doing enough to get to the heart of the issue in terms of creating entrepreneurs.
Not disputing that there's more to be done. I mean, I suppose if I can give you two very specific examples. Hatcheries, things like Entrepreneurial Spark, the Tech Cube in Edinburgh are great examples, actually, of, and a lot of it's business-led, industry-led, on how to support young people in terms of their own start-up. The thing that always impressed me about Entrepreneurial Spark was it was probably like a real living, breathing MBA. That young people really would be learning so much on the spot. So certainly in terms of John Swinney's announcement with regards to Edge funding, that was kind of building on the hatchery or Entrepreneurial Spark model. But there is another group of young people that I suppose I would like to mention, where I think there's more potential to encourage self-employment, and that's actually with young offenders who will have very entrepreneurial skills that need to be far more constructively redirected and rechanneled. And this will be a group of young people who, because of lists of previous convictions, that some employers may have great anxieties about employing. And, so I'm interested in terms of what more we can do in terms of young offenders in, appropriate self-employment.
Let's really follow up on what Alison Johnson started off with in our first question. And you also mentioned earlier in your introduction opportunities for all. I actually believe there's a perception within the, in quotes, sort of disabled community that it's opportunities for some. Given that when a young person, say with a disability, is either going to college or university, maybe some FE aspect, or trying to get into an apprenticeship or internship, that the support they need isn't always readily available. For instance, someone going to college or university sometimes has to wait maybe 6-8 weeks to get, after the course has started, to get the appropriate equipment or support they actually need. So they've missed out quite a significant part of that early period in their FE training. And again, if people are going into modern apprenticeships or internships, how do we ensure that the support and the equipment, the specialist equipment that they may need, is there at their start time?
I mean, let me say to Mr Robertson that opportunities for all must and need be opportunities for all, and we can't have a group of young people that are not able to access provision. Yeah,
which is probably coming from some of the agencies out there that there are barriers.
Yeah, and I think perceptions are important, even if they're perceptions as opposed to you know, based on solid facts. It is important that we have to tackle and overcome perceptions as well. I'm disappointed to hear of issues where there is delay in support equipment, because that should not be beyond the wit of man or woman. You know when somebody's course is starting, and you know there's your target, and it's about dealing with the practicalities. I suppose in terms of the MA issue, some of this is about cultures and employers. You know, I know that Scottish Government in its recent recruitment of modern apprentices employed a young man with a physical disability, and that was, you know, accommodated and to taken care of. So, you know, we just need to be getting on and doing the pragmatic and sensible things, and where there are examples of things not working, I would be really keen to know of that so that we can address it. Is there anything you want to?
You're open to meeting with agencies who have, say, if they have a recruitment programme in employment, you'd be open to meet with those agencies to discuss this and take it further?
Of course, absolutely, of course. And that offers open to any member, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Margaret McDougall.
Good morning. I really just wanted to ask about this connectivity between SMEs and colleges, and I'm really referring to the paper from last week where Donald Macbeath from North Highland College stated that taking on an additional apprenticeship represents a 4-year investment. And I just wondered if that is a common approach between colleges and SMEs, because surely not all apprenticeships are for 4 years. And I mean, I have before me a paper from Skills Development Scotland where some of the modern apprenticeships are only averaging out about 9 months. So I really just, could you maybe explain to me where we're coming from? And the colleges are saying that, okay, that's only one college, but is this common across Scotland, or it's just, is there that understanding where apprenticeships don't have to last for 4 years, and you know, it's that connectivity with other agencies and that kind of thing?
Have over 80 plus modern apprenticeship frameworks. We have frameworks at level 2, level 3. Frameworks vary in length. Of course, engineering apprenticeships are at level 3 and tend to be, you know, the 3-4 years. But there are other frameworks that are shorter. It just depends on, you know, the specific framework. The framework is devised, approved by the Modern Apprenticeship Group, and that's very much about you know, looking at the needs of industry. So, you know, there isn't a one size fits all here. Of course, taking on an apprentice is an investment. It's a commitment. I see it as a co-investment between private sector and government. Government's contributions to the cost of training the apprenticeship. The strength of our apprenticeship model is on the employee status of the apprenticeship. That's something that I'll hold dear to. Our MA programme is linked to real jobs, and the employed status leads to sustainable employment amongst young people. So I'm not, of course it's an investment and a commitment by employers. It's one that government's contributing to. But the big message that we really need to get across, that everybody in the skills system has to be really pushing this message, is actually, if as a business that you're serious about economic growth, you need to be serious about creating opportunities for young people. Because actually, in the long term, it's far more economical to be growing your own talent than it is trying to deal with skill shortages and buying in skilled labour at a later stage. There is a positive business case for employing young people in terms of diversity in your workforce. Young people have, good qualifications. They're willing to learn, unlike me, they're not set in their ways. They have skills that are probably more attuned to the modern world, and that, young people make a positive contribution to the bottom line in any business. And, I feel really strong and passionate about that all aspects of the skills system need to be getting out there and selling the benefits of employing young people to employers, and that we all have a role to play with that. Because if we look at the percentage of young people in the workforce, both in the public and private sector, that's been falling since 2005. And, we can't have that continue. We need to halt that decline. Young people are our future, and they need to be part of our economy, and we need to be creating employment opportunities for young people. Anyway, I think I've kind of went off in my rant.
Tangent.
Convener, I'm too sorry, a tangent, yes. But it is Christmas.
Thank you. That's an excuse for everything.
That's an excuse for everything, yes, sorry.
Could I just
Yes,
continue
please,
on
Margaret
that?
McDougall. Yes.
Just on the modern apprentices, do you have any information on how many young people actually, they go through a training, if it's a 9-month apprenticeship, it's a training session rather than an apprenticeship, I would say. Do you have any figures or statistics on just how many of them are actually getting jobs out of that?
Absolutely, and we'll be publishing information about that in the very near future. And what classifies an apprenticeship isn't necessarily the length of that apprenticeship. It's the fact that it's employed. It's the fact that it's about learning skills that are absolutely relevant to that career choice. It's the quality of the framework. So the apprenticeship programme is quite distinct from other training provision. I don't see it just as another training programme. I quite often have sometimes large employers come to me, looking for funding through the apprenticeship programme for what in effect is a training programme. So there is quite important distinctions between the apprenticeship model and the training programme. But the employed status means that we have very, very high levels of sustained employment of young people who complete their apprenticeship, either because they will continue to be employed in the job in which they did their apprenticeship, or once they're qualified, they go on to a better job. Our apprenticeship programme is very successful. It's actually, on average, apprenticeships in Scotland are longer than anywhere else in the UK. They are better recognised by Scottish businesses. In terms of survey information, 57% of businesses are aware of the apprenticeship programme, whereas elsewhere in the UK it's 20 to 25%. So we've got a good skills model in terms of the apprenticeship programme, but we will, and I feel I'm maybe perhaps going round the houses again, convener, with regards to Ms McDougall's question, but there is forthcoming information about the positive destinations of apprentices.
Okay, well, I think that probably concludes the evidence session. Thank you, Minister, for coming along. Thank you, Mr McAloon, and thank you for answering our questions. You've given the committee a lot to ruminate over the coming weeks, and I'm sure there's an issue we'll want to return to in the near future, as it's something very relevant to the committee's work and the strength of the Scottish economy. So thank you for coming. I hope you're sitting far enough away from us not to have been infected by our coughs and colds at this end of the table.
I've had my flu jab.
And wish you a happy Christmas, and I think we'll suspend for a few minutes to allow a changeover.
Thank you, convener. And if there's further information that, given your further ruminations, that you would like to be provided, of course, delighted to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay, if we can reconvene. Item 4 on the agenda, we have a draft public bodies consent motion on the public bodies bracket abolition of British shipbuilders close bracket order 2013. I don't think this is particularly controversial. Emily, got any comments they want to make on it?
No, you read it well.
Okay, we have to, as a committee, consider whether to recommend that the forthcoming draft motion be approved, and if so, to report to Parliament on that basis. People happy to agree that we recommend it be approved?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think with that, we move into private session.